Spartans, Truth and Fiction. What associations come to your mind at the word Sparta? Were the Spartans so harsh, and what did they really look like? Let's figure it out together. Sparta, Truth and Fiction. Did you know that the word laconic comes from the name of the area in Sparta, Laconia? The Spartans spoke very little and only to the point. Anything that interfered with training and could be distracting was eradicated. Luxuries have disappeared. There has been a simplification of life and food. The Spartans don't allow strangers into their territory and don't go anywhere themselves and don't engage in art. At that time, you wouldn't find poets, artists, or scientists on the territory of Sparta, because all this interfered and distracted from sports and military training. Lacedaemon is the original name of Sparta, was located in the region of Laconia in Greece, and the words Spartans and Sparta came into being thanks to the Romans. The society of the Spartans was very complex. The upper class was a kind of aristocracy. These were full citizens, the homoios. The next class are the common people. This included children of non-homoios who were raised as Spartans, former helots and free non-citizens. The third were called helots. These were the enslaved Greeks. They posed a considerable threat to the Spartans, so they were carefully watched and killed for any disobedience because the Spartans had once already faced a helot rebellion, which they could not extinguish for a long time. To get rid of the most powerful helots, young Spartans were sent out every year to rob and kill slaves. Such robberies were called crypteia and took place at night. Thus, the Spartans received a real battle experience and got used to the blood. Sparta was ruled by two kings from the dynasty of Agiads and Eurypontids. If a war broke out, one of the kings went on a campaign, the other remained in Sparta. Political decisions in Sparta were made by a council of elders called Gerousia. The council consisted of kings and 28 gerontes. They were elected by the People's Assembly for life. Men over 60 years old could become members of the council or senate. Initially, Sparta led an ordinary life like all the ancient Greeks. But in the 6th century BC, Lycurgus introduced new reforms which affected the impoverishment of the cultural system and the full focus on military training. The Spartans learned to write and read just as much as was necessary for military affairs. Sparta abandoned all the attributes of luxury. Even the coins were replaced with pieces of iron. All citizens were forbidden to drink alcohol. From the age of 7, boys were sent to the barracks, where the children slept on their own handmade flooring from the vine. The future Spartans were almost not fed. The children were forced to steal. According to the Spartans, it was in such conditions that cunning and courage should have formed in boys. The main thing was not to get caught stealing, because for this they were severely punished. Young men were trained for over 10 years. After graduation, the Spartans were allowed to wear long hair, and after the age of 30 to wear mustaches. From a very young age, the boys learned to run fast and to use swords and spears. Thus, the Spartans became true universal warriors with whom no one in Greece could compare. Plato said that Lycurgus had devised 4 ways to make young men into real warriors: through physical exertion, shared meals, hunting, and crypteia. Spartan Training. From a young age, the boys were taught strict discipline and exhausted with 20 hours of training each day. The main task of the Spartans was to develop endurance. They didn't try to build muscle. They were taught endurance, and they were also taught to go without food for a long time and fight for a long time without rest. Very much attention was paid to running. The future Spartans ran around with a heavy shield and helmet. Fights with each other were the norm. The strongest youths participated in the Olympic Games. Long training sessions ended with exercises with sandbags or clay. Spartan girls were a match for the guys. They also studied military affairs and took part in competitions. It was they who were considered the most free women in Greece. The main task of a Spartan woman was to give birth to a healthy child. Therefore, Girls have always been involved in sports. Spartan girls had great rights, and that is why other Greeks often talked about matriarchy in Sparta. This was explained by the fact that Spartans massively died in battles, and women had to inherit the land. Marriage was a necessary part of Spartan life. They simply despised the unmarried and never missed an opportunity to disgrace them. At the festivals in Laconia, the men were divided into 3 different choirs according to age. The old men sang about their past youth and how strong and brave they had been. The middle-aged men sang along to them that they could handle any enemy, and the young men finished the song promising to deal with enemies in the future. The songs of the Spartans were almost the same. The warriors didn't want to change anything and didn't even try to improve their musical instruments. Did they kill the sick and weak children? Many are sure that weak children in harsh Sparta were thrown off a cliff. This myth became widespread thanks to Plutarch, who wrote that the father had no right to control the upbringing of the child himself. He took the child to the elders, who carefully examined the infant. If the child was healthy and well-built, then the elders ordered the father to raise the child according to the laws of Sparta. If the child was sick, weak, or ugly, then it was necessary to get rid of him. But Plutarch's words are debatable. The author lived quite late, when Greece was already part of the Roman Empire. Here we get this information from the biography of Lycurgus. Though Plutarch was a Greek, he was a subject of Rome. The historians of that time often liked to embellish reality. Another fact that served as a counter-argument to Plutarch's words was the existing hypomaiones class. This included physically disabled residents. Also, the archaeological excavations of that time don't confirm the long-term practice of infanticide. What did the Spartans look like? All men wore long hair and beards because only a few of the wealthiest ancient Greeks could afford to shave. It was not customary to have a haircut and shave among the Spartans. Hair and beards were braided. According to research by scientists, the average height of men in Sparta was from 170 to 182 centimeters. Women were from 150 to 157 centimeters. The Spartans were rather wiry and thin people. They covered dozens of kilometers on foot. They often took donkeys and slaves with them on campaigns to carry their shields weighing over 10 kilograms. Their shields were engraved with the letter lambda, signifying belonging to Lacedaemon. The helmet of the Spartans looked like a helmet with a point upwards. The main weapon of the Spartan was a spear 2.5 meters long. Men wore no jewelry. Sometimes rings on their fingers were allowed. All other jewelry was considered feminine. The Spartans all ate together from one pot. The food was rather meager, usually lentil stew. The Spartans usually went on a campaign during the full moon. Before this, the king made sacrifices to Athena, Zeus, Eros, and the Muses. The Spartans were noted for their courage, discipline, and determination. Those who dared to flee the battlefield were despised. They were deprived of all rights, excluded from participation in conversations. At all the holidays, they were laughed at, and they felt universal contempt. Cowards wore a cloak made of rags of different fabrics. Were obliged to give way to absolutely everyone and to shave one half of their head. No one spoke to the cowards. Their daughters could not be married, and their sons could not marry. The decline of invincible Sparta. Undoubtedly, the Spartan army was the strongest and served as the main tool for conducting foreign policy with all neighbors. The Romans admired the Spartans for their strength, fearlessness, and endurance. But still, the army in Sparta was low-tech, was not familiar with engineering, and didn't know how to capture the fortress. The Spartans were constantly at war with someone, and many died, which led to a weakening of the army. The remaining Spartans even began to build defensive fortifications that had previously been unnecessary. In 242 BC, only 700 living citizens of Sparta remained alive. The upper classes gradually broke the laws of Lycurgus and began to acquire wealth. Their neighbors were getting stronger and had a more advanced economy. That's why in 146 BC, Lacedaemon became part of the Roman Empire, which still allowed it to maintain internal self-government. Sparta has gone down in history forever as the strongest army with versatile warriors. But you can't always win. What do you think? What else did Sparta have to focus on keeping a millennium of life and prosperity?